Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. As a podcast host, I am always on the lookout for new podcasts, and I recently found out about one that I really enjoy, and so I reached out to the hosts to come on Attendance Bias. Luckily, of the two hosts, one of them is a big Phish fan, while the other is, well, less so. I'm never one to exclude, so today I welcome the co-hosts of the podcast Rock Docs, Andy and Dave. For today's episode, Andy chose to tell about his homecoming show, October 23rd, 2021 at Chula Vista. Rock Docs is a podcast where our two hosts choose a music documentary, not always rock and roll, and then they provide an extensive review of it. It combines two of my favorite interests, music and movies, taking a look at some of my longtime favorites like Festival Express and The Last Waltz, as well as introducing me to new music and movies that otherwise I would probably never pay attention to. Rock Docs is available wherever you find your podcasts. It was also fun that while Andy had emotional ties and experiences to today's show at Chula Vista, Dave is the first Attendance Bias guest who is not a Phish fan, but he was a good sport. He still listened to the nearly 3-hour show and was able to contribute an outsider's view to balance out all of the gushing and all of the hyperbole from myself and Andy. So let's join Andy and Dave of Rock Docs to talk about Garth Brooks, light funk, and much more as we discuss Phish's show from October 23rd, 2021 at Chula Vista. Andy and Dave from Rock Docs, welcome to Attendance Bias. Andy, how are you?
Doing all right, man. How are you?
I'm all right. And Dave?
We'll see.
So if you can't, those of you listening, Dave is kind of shifting in his seat a little bit, a little uncomfortable. Would it be fair, Dave, before we press forward or get started on any of this, to just say exclusively you are not a Phish fan?
I mean, look, I don't know how much you want to get into. I think it's fair to say that it's not a band I listen to that often, or I don't listen to them that often voluntarily. Like sometimes I'm at Andy's house or in his car or, whatever. But not in my top 5,000 bands that I listen to most often.
Right.
I'll run interference. I'll run interference for Dave.
All right, fair enough.
And say, so Dave and I have this show together. Before that, we talked about music together a lot. I adore Phish, and David doesn't. But it has never prevented me from thinking that the next thing I show him will change the tide. We haven't gotten there yet. Listeners to the show will know that we have a recurring bit where I compare some band that he loves to an element of Phish, and he rejects it out of hand. He's a good sport. We did an episode on Bittersweet Motel, and honestly, the thing that he hated most about that movie was not Phish's music. In fact, he's borderline complimentary of the music that is included in Bittersweet Motel, if you listen to that episode that we did with Rob Mitchum from 36 from the Vault. But he's also attended 2 separate Phish shows, one in the 1.0 era, one in the 2.0 era. So he's, despite his years of not being a Phish fan, I think it would be fair to say that he keeps something of an open mind.
I try to be open-minded, and I also just want to establish, for people that are listening to this podcast, I'm not here to yuck somebody's yum. If Phish is your thing, awesome. You may not like Guided by Voices, which is a band that I like, or whatever. There's probably 10,000 music artists that I like that somebody who's listening doesn't care for, and that's great. I believe a person comes to art and they experience it and have their own perspective, and that is valuable and valued. And so I'm going to have some fun with it. That's kind of what we're here for. So, I'll get some licks in, but I'm not here to give somebody a hard time or to bum somebody out. If it's a band they love, great. And maybe one day it'll work. It'll catch on for me. And I want everything to be good. Like I never go to a movie or listen to a record or anything hoping it's going to suck or I'm going to have a bad time. It's not like, that doesn't seem like fun to me. I try to keep an open mind.
I think we're going to find out in a couple minutes here that he liked this show a lot. That's what I think.
This is going to be fun. I'm excited. Hope springs eternal.
Hope springs eternal.
Well, for those of you listening, Andy mentioned a few times we did an episode on at our show. So if you skipped over the intro completely, Just so we know, Andy and Dave are here because they are also podcast hosts, and half of them are a Phish fan. But they are podcast hosts of what I consider to be an extremely fun and right up my alley topic. And the show is called Rock Docs, DOCS. And so well, you know what? I'll let you guys talk about it. My impression is just you watch, you kind of review, but really offer your insights onto different rock and roll and other types of music documentaries, no matter what genre it's in. But you do the elevator pitch. Tell me, what is Rock Docs about?
Rock Docs is a podcast about music documentaries. We're brought to you by Treble Media, which is at treblezine.com. I encourage you to go there and support them. It's a great music website. We're happy to be associated with them. We watch documentaries, new and old, all types about, we're open to basically any type of music or any genre, any documentary that's music related. Usually it's about an individual artist or band, but it could be about a scene or a festival or whatever. Sometimes we often have guests. Sometimes those guests are people involved with the films themselves. Like we've had some directors and producers. We had the Oscar-winning producer of Summer of Soul, Joseph Patel, on. We recently had Sam Jones, who's the director of the new documentary about Jason Isbell, and he also did a classic documentary about Wilco. And it's just, I don't know. Andy and I love music documentaries, and we love watching them and talking about them. And sometimes we record that, and it's a podcast.
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. If you're into music, I imagine you're mostly also into music documentaries. Seems there might be a small group of people who's just like an absolute music head who's like, but I hate if anybody puts it on camera.
Yeah. I hate hearing people talk about rock and roll. That's why I'm listening to a podcast about it.
Right. But so I think if you like music documentaries, you'll probably find something you'd like in our show. I hope.
Well, Andy, how did the podcast get started? How did you guys choose its topic? Because it seems like it's a fairly obvious discussion point, but it seems pretty unique as far as what's out there about specifically music documentaries.
Yeah, so it's actually a pandemic project. We were, David and I, our wives and kids were a pandemic bubble, to use a very weird dated term at this point. But so we would hang out together, and it was basically our only social interaction of any kind. And David and I would talk about the music documentaries we were watching every night. At a certain point, I think David recognized that, oddly enough, there wasn't already a podcast out on this. It seemed like such low-hanging fruit for something, that there's a boom of music documentaries coming out right now. Look at any streaming service. There's always a new one. They're pretty well made for the most part. There seems to be some money behind them. They're nice and shiny, covering a lot of different genres. And it just seemed like a good idea, basically. And we kicked it around for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months before we finally pulled the trigger and just started doing it. But we've been going ever since then. And, there's a small but vocal audience of people who likes it.
Something I like about your podcast is your definition of a rock and roll documentary is quite flexible.
Yes.
Because I was wondering when I was scrolling through your episodes, once I discovered your podcast, and I got to listen to that one. Festival Express, my favorite one ever. I got to listen to that one. And to me, Festival Express is a prototypical rock documentary. There's talking heads, not the band, the Talking Heads, but, people involved giving their opinion from years in retrospect. There are clips of music. There's discussion, quote, what does the whole thing mean? That to me is, if you had to send into space an example of rock doc genre, that would be it. But I was wondering if if Stop Making Sense, the actual Talking Heads, is that a rock doc? Because that's really just a filmed concert.
I mean, we've been kind of debating this since day one. I think that one really is a concert film because there's no narrative element to it. That doesn't mean that we won't ever do an episode about it, because we did episodes about The Last Waltz, another one called Erg, A Music War, which is a great, fabulous documentary, if you can find it. And it's from 1981 and it's just like clips of like 40 post-punk bands, each playing like one song. So it's like everybody from XTC to The Police to bands
Devo.
you maybe, Devo, to bands you maybe have never heard of. And it's just one after the other. There's no, it sort of tells the story, but it's not like there's no talking head. There's really nobody talking at all. So we're pretty flexible about what we discuss, but I mean, most of our episodes are about, what you would think of as a music documentary in the sense that, like, there's probably some live performance or recorded music involved, but it's, really telling a story, whether it's about a band or an artist or about an event like Festival Express or something like that.
I think
it's just easier to talk about sometimes, like if there's a narrative.
Yeah, I think that's basically the thing. Is it makes sense. The whole hang up to me would be, what would we say on the episode besides, oh man, this one, that was so good, wasn't it? It was
Tina brought the funk on that one.
And that said, we've walked into a recording a couple times wondering if we were going to have enough to say, and sooner or later, we have to cut the mics off at an hour, and we figured it out. So luckily, we're long-winded music dorks who always find a way to hear ourselves talk, as I'm doing right now. But I stuff makes sense. You could talk about Demi. You could talk about the history of the band. You could talk about how they were, building all this personnel at this time and do it for these live shows. So yeah, I would be surprised if we carry on much longer. I would be surprised if Stop Making Sense never makes an appearance.
Yeah, because it is a central moment in film history, Yeah. And when I found your podcast, like I said earlier, now was the first thing I do with any podcast. I scroll and see what the episodes are, especially when it's something like this that's so central to my interests. The first rock doc that I thought of was The Kids Are All Right. The Who one.
Yeah.
Because The Who are my favorite band, even with Phish, +1, -1, depending on the day. And I went back and watched it. I hadn't seen it in years. There is no narrative to it. It's just a compilation of performances through the band's career. And I thought, is this the sort of thing where the viewer has to create a narrative in his or her head for it to work? Or is it just only for Who fans?
Yeah, the Erga Music War that David mentioned is an interesting line like that, where you sort of second guess yourself as you're watching it of how much work you're doing versus how much authorial intent is going on. But when I watched that movie, just moving from band to band and thinking about them in context of what was going on in music and the director's decisions of who they included and what they included, I start to build a narrative. And that movie feels like it has a narrative to me, even though it is there. No one speaks at any point. It's just 40 consecutive appearances. So I haven't watched The Kids Are All Right in maybe 20 years. I remember loving it when I last watched it. So I'd be interested to check in on that and see the same thing. But, I think in general, I would imagine most directors would say, no, there is a narrative in there and you're not imagining it. And every decision I made was deliberate and all in furtherance of an idea I wanted to convey.
So getting to know you guys a little bit as hosts, sure, but also we want to know you as music fans. Andy, more specifically, you as a Phish fan, and Dave as a music fan and podcast fan, I suppose. So let's get it started. The attendance bias lightning round.
Attendance bias lightning round.
Andy, when was your first Phish show, and what do you remember from it?
It was September 17th, 2000 at Merriweather Post Pavilion. I grew up in Columbia, Maryland. And so Phish coming to town was like a big day in the summer, even before I was in the fall of my junior year of high school at that show. I knew of Phish before that. We used to go to lots of shows at Merriweather. We could hop the back fence and sneak in. So we didn't even have the bar of, is this worth $20 to go to? Because we knew how to sneak in. So I saw lots of shows that I wouldn't have otherwise seen. What I think most people would remember about that show is that's, I think, widely considered the best Mango song ever. It was a really big Mango jam. What I remember though was, I was very young, and I was probably on the nerves of most fans who were at the concert that night. I was 16 years old.
Were you asking everyone every question? What song is this? What's going on?
Yeah, or probably just talking in the back. I'm sure I was a menace to the crowd. I remember the lot more than anything. I remember not knowing a lot of the songs. Probably I knew very little at that point. But I was enticed. I was enticed by the scene. I was enticed by the idea, and I liked the sound of the music. And I remember just walking around and thinking everybody seemed so carefree and like they were in their place. And even though I was striving for that, I was a poser. I guess that's the shortest way to say it. I was a poser and I was aware of it, but I was interested. And going was enough to plant the seed and to start to do the work behind the scenes so that I wouldn't be quite as much of a blight the next time around.
The guys in the back of the lawn, thank you for not being so chatty. What was your most recent Phish show, and what did you think of it?
Last Phish show I went to was Sunday night at the Hollywood Bowl for the run that just ended. So I went to all 3 nights, but so that makes Sunday the most recent one. I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic show. I loved Saturday too, and I think Saturday has gotten more attention. The show I went to had in the first set fantastic cities. If you like an up-tempo cities, I thought it was really good. And then also opened the second set with a really fun Mr. Completely. I'm always welcome on Mr. Completely. I thought that one was fantastic. No Quarter got a nice appearance, and in that giant cavernous venue, they filled it up with sound. Then it was an absolute page showcase, and was in my opinion a really good show. And the Saturday was like all 1.0 basically in the first set, and people were blown away by the set list. And don't get me wrong, it was very good. I don't think the Sunday night show on paper stands out quite as much as the Saturday one does, but for me, I actually preferred the Sunday night show. I thought it was very, very interesting and well played.
Dave, do you remember the date, or maybe Andy does for you, the date that you went to your first Phish show?
I don't remember. So I went to 2 Phish shows. I was trying to think of my history with Phish. So I grew up in San Diego, where we now live. But my freshman year of college, I went to University of Michigan. And the 2 things that I remember most clearly from my first few days there were this is 1994. The school says, okay, here's your email address. And I said, what's an email? Because this is 1994. And also a few days in, hanging out in somebody's dorm room. And the guy's he ceremonially opened a unzipped one of those cassette cases, with the zipper
and Case Logic, absolutely.
Yeah. And was like, are you into Phish? And I was like, what is that? And it seemed like everybody who was from the East Coast or Midwest or whatever at this point, who was 18 showing up to college, knew of this band. And I, being from Southern California, knew a lot about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, that kind of thing, but was not familiar with Phish. When I was getting into music, and I was a teenager in the pre-internet days when you just couldn't get whatever music, there's only so much music you could expose yourself to. I had the Rolling Stone Encyclopedia of Rock and Roll, and I remember going through it one day, and on one page, as I recall, there was a picture of the Grateful Dead. It was probably in the Bobby wearing, jorts era,
and my favorite,
and whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And then the next page in my mind, I don't know if they're really, but in my mind, the next page I turned to, and there's a picture of the Clash, just looking like the coolest, most badass people who had ever walked the planet. And I had not heard any of these. There's no way for me to hear either of these bands. Maybe I had heard Rock the Casbah, and maybe I had heard a Dead song or something, but they weren't on the radio at that time, and I wasn't exposed to them. So I could just look at these 2 pictures and flip back and forth. And I was like, well, I know what team I'm on. And not that I was ever a punk, but I just had that leaning where I was like, I guess the hippies are bad and the punks and those people are cool. I kind of had that bias, the anti-hippie thing. And eventually I did get into the Dead, not too much longer after that. But yeah, Phish, I just kind of was exposed to it and tried to grab me. And then I went to a couple shows. I think one was in 95 and one was in 2000, but that might not be exact.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe you went
I think we tracked this down at one point.
I think you went to the Sports Arena show, December 4th, 1996.
Right, San Diego Sports Arena.
San Diego Sports Arena.
San Diego Rock Arena, as we call it.
This is people listening might know it as the site of the meeting between the Kid and Penny Lane in Almost Famous. And the run.
Right, well, Cameron Crowe is from San Diego, right?
Cameron Crowe's from San Diego.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Okay. So that's 95, the Sports Arena
96,
show? Yeah,
96. And then I think your next one would have been 2003 at Chula Vista, the same venue that we're going to talk about.
No. I went to the Forum. I went to a show at the Forum in LA, the Great Western, before it was redone, in around 2000. It would have had to be around, I don't know, something around 99 to 2001, something like that. They must have played the Forum in that zone. I could probably figure it out. Both times were a situation where like friends had a bunch of tickets and I had nothing going on that night. You know what I mean? So like, I mean, I'll go to pretty much any concert, especially when I was like, 19 or something, and I had literally nothing better to do with my life. And so, both were just situations where it was like, hey, we got tickets. You want to come? Sure. Okay. I'll come to a concert and hang out and check it out. Yeah. So those were the circumstances where I first encountered our four friends.
What's the most recent show you've seen?
What's the most recent? Well, Andy and I are going to see Billy Strings tomorrow, but as of this,
awesome.
As of this conversation, my most recent show was maybe it might have been the They Might Be Giants show that Andy and I went to like a few weeks ago. I don't know, a few weeks ago, maybe it was a month ago. Yeah, it was great. It was pouring rain, outside venue. They Might Be Giants, kind of older guys, probably not that much older, probably the same age as Phish, complaining about the rain, getting soaked. It was a real good time.
Yeah,
I think that was the last show. I don't know that I've been to something since then. It's been a few weeks. Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to Billy Strings tomorrow. Psyched. It's going to be a great time.
That's awesome. And he's selling big venues now.
The next biggest outdoor pavilion down from the Chula Vista venue we're going to talk about today. But he sold it out on Saturday, and Sunday is close to a sellout. So, and let me tell you, jam bands in general don't do great here in San Diego. A lot of bands don't do great here in San Diego. We don't exactly have the best the best crowds. But Billy has tapped into something because he can sell some tickets in the city.
It's so fun how you mentioned way earlier, I think it was Dave, I think it was you when you said that you went to college and you'd never heard of Phish because you were from the West Coast, that Phish made such a concentrated effort in the late 80s and early 90s to make a name for themselves in LA and Northern California, and they just bounced back. It took until like 1997 for them to really sell out a Western venue. You could argue even now they're not as big of a fan base then. But now, Billy Strings, the world has changed so much that anyone could be from anywhere.
Yeah,
Phish could have been. Phish could, this is like the days when, when I went to college in 1994, Phish could have been huge 2 blocks over from me and I wouldn't have known. You know what I mean? Like, so in my world, he wasn't on the radio and my friends didn't know about them, but I had like 6 friends. You know what I mean? So like, I wasn't exposed to like the widest world of music even then, but
Dave, name a rock doc that was better than you thought it would be.
Oh, God. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot that are, we don't necessarily say better than I thought it would be, but like sometimes we'll say like better than it needed to be. So that's sometimes the category, like meaning like, sometimes these are just content and the fans will watch it and, it'll do well on streaming, well enough to justify its existence. And then sometimes they just go like above and beyond. For example, a recent one that we just ate up was the one about Garth Brooks, who's not an artist that like either Andy and I really had that much of a relationship with. I'm not like, hating on him or whatever, but like I couldn't name more than a couple of his hits. But the documentary, not for reasons that they intended, but because he comes off like
a crazy person.
He comes off like a really crazy person, and like some wiring is not right there. And that's the way the film is clearly like a Garth Brooks joint. Like everything was clearly chosen by him, and yet I think he thinks he probably is coming off well. Yeah. And you're like, somebody needs to call the police because this person could like there must be bodies buried somewhere. He just comes up. He comes off like a supervillain in a Marvel movie or something. Like the way he sees the world is perfectly coherent to him, but he's the villain. You know what I mean? And so it's an incredible movie. And I've been telling people about it and, cornering people and be like, you got to see this movie. And they're like, I don't care about Garth Brooks. Why would I watch that? Whatever. And it's like, no. You're missing a film with a protagonist who is unlike anybody you've ever seen in your entire life. It's forgetting about even documentaries. Yeah. He's an anti-hero.
He's a soprano. Yeah, he's Tony Soprano.
He's like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, it's there's plenty, but that's just one that comes to mind.
And Dave, one more for you. Was there a rock doc, kind of the flip side of my previous question, was there a rock doc that you were really psyched, really looking forward to watching, and it left you feeling underwhelmed?
So there's I came, when in the early 2000s, when there was that like garage rock revival, and there was these bands like the Strokes, Interpol, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. I was way into that. I saw all those bands at the time. I was super into that whole scene. Then they made this great book about it called Meet Me in the Bathroom. That's this oral history, just fabulous book, full of great anecdotes and detail about all these bands that I just love and the whole setting the scene. And then they said, okay, they're going to make a documentary about it. And it's by the directors of a documentary about LCD Sound System that I liked called Shut Up and Play the Hits. And we were, Andy and I basically manifested, when we first started Rock Docs, we would talk sometimes at the top of the show. We were like, oh, like what's a book that should be made into a music documentary? We both agreed this had to be the one. It was like, there's no way this could flop. And the documentary came out last year and we watched it and reviewed it for the show. And boy, it sucks. It is not good. And I mean, I'm sure they worked hard on it. And sometimes the plane just doesn't take off, no slight to anybody involved, but boy, it was for us a total brick.
Yeah. I saw there was an interview with Albert Hammond Jr. from The Strokes, who just released a solo album, which, by the way, if anybody's interested and likes The Strokes, listen to Albert Hammond Jr.'s new solo record. It's awesome. But in promoting it, somebody asked him if he had seen Meet Me in the Bathroom yet, and he said no, he hadn't watched it. And I was just overcome with jealousy. It was just like, wow. how nice that would be to not have seen it.
You want to eternal sunshine it from your brain, to scrub it from your brain and pretend you've never seen it.
Right.
So, Handy, this is the question I end every lightning round with. And I'm sorry, Dave, only applies to Phish fans. What is the weirdest thing that you've ever seen at a Phish show?
I don't know that I have seen that much weird stuff if you take away the standard stuff from Phish shows. But I think my answer is at SPAC in Saratoga Performing Arts Center for non-Phish fans. SPAC in 2009, torrential downpour just as people were lining up to get in. And this was in the paper ticket era. And so everybody got absolutely soaked. Their tickets got absolutely soaked. And the readers weren't reading any of the tickets. And so there was no movement at the line. Impatient people dealing with that, plus people who didn't have tickets, decided to take advantage of the situation and rush the gates, a little gate crashing. So the gates crash, and eventually I have tickets. I'm just wandering through, prepared to show my ticket to anybody who decides to manhandle me. But we see that the person who had spearheaded this whole gate crashing thing is this guy with no shirt on, very long hair. He's getting, thrown around by 3 or 4 cops. And he picks his head up, and I see that it is a guy I went to college with who I haven't seen in like 6 years. And my sister-in-law, thinking, I guess, that she could have a conversation with him, the cops wouldn't mind or something, she goes, "Kirby, hey!" And he looks over, and in spite of the cops, trying to arrest him, he goes, "Oh, hey, what's up, guys? Don't worry about me. I'll be out in a minute." And I don't think he was out in a minute, but that was the first time I saw him since school, and the last time I've seen him as well. So shout out to Kirby. Hope you're doing all right.
Kirby, wherever you are, man, we're thinking of you.
Yeah.
When was this show played?
Well, for everyone listening, I completely forgot to mention this at the top of the show, but the show that Andy and Dave chose to discuss was Phish's performance on October 23rd, 2021 at what was then and may still be called the North Island Credit Union Amphitheater in Chula Vista. I would guess most Phish fans it's just Chula Vista. Were you seeing them? Oh, I'll be at Chula Vista.
Yeah.
Is that one of
Chula.
those? Yeah, just Chula. Okay. Is that one of those venues that its name changes every other year and it's not worth remembering?
Yes, 100%.
It's been Sleep Train.
Yeah, that was a funny
Sleep
one.
Train, that's how I knew it.
Cal Coast Credit Union, I think.
No, Cal Coast
right?
Credit Union is where we're seeing Billy. It's been.
Oh, okay.
It was Coors.
I don't.
It was Coors for a long time.
It was Coors for a long time. Right. Everybody just says Chula, unless maybe you're not from San Diego and you just say San Diego because it's like, the San Diego metro area.
I don't know, Dave. You've probably seen over 100 shows at that venue in the course of your life.
I saw Bob Dylan and Paul Simon. I saw the Up in Smoke tour with Eminem and NWA, Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, Exhibit. Great show. I go way back.
So zooming out a little bit before we get to this show specifically, the 2021 summer tour got a lot of attention and there was a lot of tentative excitement because it was the first tour in quotes, back from the COVID postponement, and it generally went off without a hitch, unless my brain is just choosing not to remember any crazy trauma. The thing is, the fall tour got a lot more attention because even though it was on the West Coast, I think entirely, it did end with 4 nights in Las Vegas to mixed reviews to that Halloween run. But just geographically, the fall tour had 13 shows. It started in San Francisco and Sacramento. It stayed mostly in California, Oregon, Arizona, and Nevada. Nevada being the Las Vegas shows, where they ended with that Sci-Fi Soldier, a Halloween show that I think would be fair to say at best had mixed reviews, and tons of people got sick afterward because of poor ventilation.
Both of those are correct. Mixed reviews, generous, I would say. Sci-Fi Soldiers, not my favorite thing they've done.
And this show was on October 23rd. It was the 7th show of the tour, so right in the middle. It was outdoors, which is, for those of us who are hypochondriacs at the time, great news. And I'll start, I guess, with you, Dave. What did you know? Oh, you weren't there, right? You didn't attend this one. You just listened for our benefit, for special occasions for this.
Yeah, no, I remember Andy attending. And I think there was even discussion, like you were like, I might get you a ticket or something. And I was like, maybe I would go to, I don't know. And then I don't know. For whatever reason, I didn't go.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask, what does it take to get you to a Phish concert? Like, what's the perfect crux of circumstances that you would say, yeah, sure, why not?
I mean, I would go, but I'm not like going out of my way. Like, it has to be local to me. Okay. And I have to like not obviously have, if I have any other plan, I mean, like, obviously if, my wife and I have something going on that night, that we planned ahead of time, I'm not canceling things to go to a Phish show, but, I don't know if it's a weekend and it's in Chula and whatever, I would probably,
I think I could have got you there. I think something.
Yeah, I'm not like, I don't have to be thrown in the trunk and zip tied and whatever, and, drugged and whatever. I mean, it's fine.
Yeah, what I can say about this is, so yes, it was the 7th. It was basically the middle of this run. I should say also that it did go off mostly without a hitch. But also there was they were supposed to have shows in Tahoe that had to be relocated to San Francisco because of a severe forest fire, and that was like they were relocated like 4 days before the show. So that was another curveball that had been going on. And then when they played those shows at Shoreline, they were very good. It was a gigantic Soul Planet that is a song people don't like, but that jam was, largely considered very good. I went to the Chula show, took the train up and saw them in LA, took the train up to Santa Barbara, saw them at the Santa Barbara Bowl, and then took the train all the way back to San Diego, where David picked me up, and then we went and saw Dead & Company at Chula Vista. So David was part of this run. So
he was part of a leg of this run.
Part of a leg of this run. He saw Dead & Co. at the same venue when I had made it back, 5 days later or whatever it was.
Some of the people at Shakedown might not have known that the shows were not. It wasn't just a 4-night Phish run. I don't know.
Yeah, and to me, it sounds almost like Interstellar. Like 1 minute away on tour is like 3 days in the real world.
Yeah, exactly.
So you leave and you come back, the show is still going on 3 days later.
Yeah, or Flatliners, more like it.
well, a deep cut, Andy.
Thanks.
Well, Andy, did you have any concerns about COVID by this time of the tour? Do you remember like your mindset at this point?
This was post-vaccine, and cases had come down a lot. So like there was some tentative optimism. I think people were happy to get back out there, but it was still very much on your mind at all times. No question. I remember I was basically okay with it at this point because I'd been vaccinated. I went to the Alpharetta run when they first came back, and I also went to Atlantic City and then Dick's and then this run. So I did a lot of shows in 2021. I remember mostly telling people I was doing that and getting very concerned looks. There were a lot of normal folks in my life were like, is that really a good idea? I felt good about it post-vaccine, but there was no question not everyone in the world was exactly as ready to hop back into the saddle.
Of all the shows, whether it was on that tour or of the shows of your history that you've seen, Why do you have attendance bias toward this performance?
Well, I think it's frankly a lot of what we were just talking about. The end of the pandemic, or what seemed like the end of the pandemic, the beginning of the end of the pandemic was very acute. I felt it very much here. It was in my hometown. I was with my wife and a lot of other people I loved, and I was doing my favorite thing, seeing Phish live, and I could actually hug them. Like, I could actually physically embrace people. It was like a culmination of things that hadn't happened in 2 years. I mean, granted, I'd seen some Phish shows leading up to this, but those were different. They felt like I was traveling for those with just a few people. Also, man, I think that this show is such a treat for people who love Phish. There's not some of the stuff that I think you can predictably imagine people getting excited about or sharing on social media the day after a show. It's not a set list that I think jumps out at people. And so I think the show did get a bit overlooked afterwards compared to some of the other stuff in that fall tour. To me, this is the reason to still chase Phish in 2022 and 2023, is that they can still put together a show this good in surprising ways, in interesting ways, doing with some ideas and some stuff that I've really never heard them do much of.
Set 1.
Well, that's what we're here for. So let's get into it. Dave, before we get into it on a song by song thing, if I were to read the overall, if I said, just give me the bullet points as, I guess you're the only sane one here, really, when it comes to Phish. You know, I think we're self-aware enough to realize, Andy and I, that we're nuts. What are your overall points? If I ask you 3 bullet points, right? What do you feed me after listening to this 3-hour show of a band that, yeah, you could be convinced to go see, but they're not in your top 5,000?
Overall, I would not say it was my thing. So if the position being taken is that this is an exemplary Phish show as a musical,
it's by one person.
As a listening,
Well,
no, I understand, but okay, but that's what that's all I have to go on. That would not necessarily sell me to then start listening to more shows. That said, there were things that I liked about it, so we can certainly talk about some of those. Maybe more things that I liked than I anticipated, but that's because I was going in with relatively low expectations.
Well, the show opens, Andy, you said that it's maybe a show that wouldn't stand out on paper as a set list, but the opener does. A Fluffhead opener is rare, although it's becoming increasingly more common, but it's always good. It's tough to argue with this, was the first thought that I had. It was the first note I wrote down. Always good to have a Fluffhead opener, period. Tough to argue with this.
Yeah. Fluffhead opener, great. Unfinished Fluffhead, really jammed out Fluffhead. Yeah, I mean, there's a flub early. I think in the compose section in the beginning, we get a pretty stark flub, but it's fine. Energy stays high. The crowd's a little shifty in the beginning. And I think you can hear that on tape. People don't necessarily react as big as you'd expect to the first note of a Fluffhead opener.
Is that a West Coast thing?
That's a San Diego thing.
Okay.
It's definitely a different energy. Especially compared to New York. I mean, nothing compares to seeing them at MSG or Bethel Woods or something like that.
But I did love that jam that you mentioned at the end of Fluffhead at about 14 minutes, when it's usually coming to a close. Trey plays this little 2-note riff. Yes. And all of a sudden, you're in a completely different universe. I forgot, listening in the car, that they opened with Fluffhead.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think you can really, it's like around 11:45, 12 minutes, the crowd really starts to dial in. People start to get really excited, and you hear a bit of a rise. Trey at like 14 plays with this like, it's similar. Gearhead David would actually know better than I do, but it sounds a lot like that like frog tone that Trey uses in the last like tour that he does. I don't know exactly what pedal what pedal it is that he's playing with there, but he starts playing. Him and Paige get into a neat little conversation with each other,
and it leads to great improv, which I think by the end of the song, and this tends to happen with Phish, they realize we could play this for an hour, but oh shit, it's only the first set opener. We can't jam for too long. Yeah. So it segues, not flawlessly, but good, into NICU, which is the first Phish song I ever heard live. So I'm always thrilled to hear it. And again, a song that does not usually get improvised, that usually doesn't jam at 6 minutes. There's an amazing NICU jam. Maybe never before. I don't know. I'll have to check the stats. But it gets dark. It gets melodic. Although it's still in NICU territory, Fishman is the one, to me, that holds this all together.
Okay, so you haven't mentioned this yet, so I'm wondering if this slipped your notice. North Island Credit Union.
I did not notice that.
Yes, NICU. So that's there actually were some tweets you can look back when the amphitheater announced their new sponsor was North Island Credit Union. There were some people who said 100% chance next time Phish plays here, we get an all-time NICU. And sure enough,
swish.
Nailed it. And yes, man, this NICU, not only is it really nice, like a really cool jam, it sets the tone for the night. It's not quite like a Tweezer Fest, but we're gonna hear this motif throughout the night. And I think at the end, so NICU has that really distinct, notable riff that they play, right? And so it lends itself well to being, breadcrumbed throughout the show, I think, because it's so distinct and you can pick up on it very easily. But at the end of this jam here, they play it just over and over and over again, like 10 or 15 straight times towards the end of the jam. And what I wrote down is it reminded me of the way Chris Rock does stand up, where he says the premise and then he says the premise and he says the premise and then he says the premise, because when he delivers the punchline, he doesn't want there to be any person in the audience that's not going to get it because they happen to miss the premise. And it's like they hammer you over the head, like, hey, hear this little riff? We're going to be doing that a lot for the next couple hours. You're going to be hearing this over and over again, But
I hear what you're saying. NICU is going to haunt the rest of this show.
Yep.
But not for the next song, which was a huge rarity. Capital letters. Wow. They played Bye Bye Foot, which to me kind of anoints this as a special show.
Yeah, totally. So me and my friends who were big geeks are looking at each other at this point. And we're just like, we're already doing the silent eyes widening and mouth over exaggerating the mouthing of the wow. You get a giant fluff head jammed out, unfinished. You get maybe the best NICU there's ever been. And then we get this crazy bust out Fishman singing, and this is how this show is. I was with some people who had never been to Phish show before and didn't know what they were getting, and they were getting pretty listless during Bye Bye Foot. There was not a lot for them for the non-fan there. I think it was a lot of chatter. You can actually hear it on the tape. There's a lot of people in the crowd talking during Bye Bye Foot.
I'm curious, Dave, this is one of Phish's most, and I don't know if it's certainly not their best, I would argue, but it is one of their ballads. Phish is not known for being in touch with their sentiments. And, they have a lyricist, right? But this song was fully written, I think, by the drummer. To me, it kind of sounds like a Pink Floyd, like Animals sort of era Floyd ballad. Where were you while listening? Where were you opinion-wise about 3 or 4 songs in once we get our first break?
I mean, the NICU thing, I mean, I hear what you guys are saying. To me, it's like I didn't have like 3 hours to like lock myself in a room, turn off the lights, and just listen to the show. I was listening to it like over a couple days, as I'm doing whatever, right? And I've heard enough Phish that like some of their music, to me, just my brain just categorizes that as you are hearing generic Phish. You know what I mean? It's like the Charlie Brown, like wah to me. And I'm not saying it's bad or good, whatever. I'm just saying like that, like there's some like mode that my brain switches into that is like, you're listening to this is Phish. You don't have to pay attention. If something interesting happens, I'll let you know. and so again, that's on me. But the NICU, I love what you guys had to say about it. To me, that totally slotted, like that just passed by. And then I noticed, 20 minutes of my life had happened. However, I will say Bye Bye Foot was by far my favorite part of this show. And I was like, wait a minute,
this sounds good. David.
I was like, wait, I was listening. I was playing baseball with my son in the front yard. And he's hitting these soft, he's 6. So, he's hitting these soft like foam balls onto my roof, which is a flat roof. So that's a little bit of a problem. But, all of a sudden this starts playing and I was like, wow, like, Trey sounds really good here. So I think it's not him singing, right?
It is not him.
It's Fishman singing? Yeah, right. Yeah. So, okay. So, maybe that's part of it. It's just like the voice being different, or that voice worked better for me. The piano, I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool song. Like, wow. Like, and then I kind of like Googled it and it was like, oh, this is a song they never play. I'm like, well, fuck me. Great. There you go.
But that makes it even more special.
Yeah, that's where we go.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll go to like 35 Phish shows.
You may have to go to a hell of a lot more than that. I do a fact check at the end of every episode. This is probably played at like 0.00025% of every Phish.
Okay.
It's only been played 6 times.
Fine. Yeah. Okay. Well, then I thought this was a really nice song that I enjoyed listening to.
Turn it off. We're done, guys.
Yeah,
listeners, listen to the rest of the show on your own. But I don't want to hear him say another thing about Phish after that. That's it.
But I was in my car listening.
If there's a John Fishman solo band, maybe we could, get into that. I don't know.
Yeah.
he just shows up places. He has bands, but like they exist for about 4 months at a time. And he just kind of shows up. Just move to Maine and you'll probably see him if you're in his region.
Be an alderman, vote for him as an alderman or whatever.
Right.
In general, big Fishman night here. He's
everywhere.
Everywhere tonight. Yeah.
But up next, don't listen to Andy. Don't turn this off because the next song is Tube. And I'm a big fan of big funky tubes. And this is a big funky tube, very layered. Great stuff here. There's like a firm pocket, like pretty much right away, because the song is only like 2.5 minutes basically, but the track is closer to 15 minutes.
Yeah, and it really it's very fast paced and propulsive in the beginning. And I think, I'm re-listening to this with the benefit of knowing that they really give it a full treatment here tonight. So maybe I'm imbuing that with what I hear at the top, but what I hear from them at the beginning of the song is, oh, we're going to get a real tube tonight. And I imagine many in the audience are among those who agree with the late great Harris Whittles that they need to jam tube more. Too often we get a 7-minute tube, and it's great. I'll still take a 7-minute tube at any first set you got for me, but a properly jammed tube is another thing, and we got one. We're still checking every box on this show when you throw in after that Bye Bye Foot, bust out a 15-minute tube jam.
Yeah, what an opening sequence. This is where I had the thought, okay, this show is really something. Like I better sit up. Because people on the show, on the attendance bias, that is, people pick their jams or their shows for a billion different reasons. And the heart of it is really pick something that's important to you. And that's such a flexible, wide-ranging word that everyone picks a good show. That's all that really means, because it's important to them. It's a good show. But this, I think, also is an objectively good show. And Tube, I think, kind of solidifies its opening as, all right, sit up and take notice.
We should also say we get our first real NICU tease.
Oh, at the end of Tube, yes.
At the end of Tube. So that's when we start to get that narrative that's going to carry through the rest of the show lay in. And it's not just the tease. People, if you look at the set list notes, they go, oh, Trey teases NICU and here and here and here. It's that, but they fall into a recurring jam that is like inspired by the NICU tease that echoes the tease itself.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that here in this Tube as well. And that's sort of the last thought at the end of the Tube jam.
Yeah, and it's not the last thought of NICU throughout. No. We have a lot more to come. But as they transition to Slave, the thing that was most notable, because I don't think this is an exceptional version of Slave to the Traffic Light. I think it's Workaday. It's good. Mm-hmm. But with the exception that it's faster than what I've gotten used to in 3.0. Usually it's quite slow. But this Slave to the Traffic Light is really soulful. It's good, although not that much different.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I really have to say about this one.
Yeah, I think it's about right. I in terms of placement, I'd always rather a Slave in the fourth quarter than
sure.
up here. But what am I going to do?
And then next up, though, is a Slow Llama.
Yeah.
Fun, exciting. Dave, if you don't know, this song Llama is usually played at like 180 beats per minute. It is a super fast, balls to the wall rock song that I think the band played after touring with the Aquarium Rescue Unit, which was like an old school jam band that used to play very quickly. And what they've done, I think starting in Meriwether Post maybe, or Walnut Creek in 2015, they slowed it down completely. And now it's just like slow, groovy, move from left to right and don't worry about it kind of llama. Andy, what do you think? Do you prefer fast, slow llama, or they're just different? Is like what you say to your kids sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, they are just different. If I'm asking what I'd rather, if they were putting the set list together and they said, "Well, hey Andy, what would you rather?" It's always going to be fast llama for me. Give me the fast. But I do like slow llama, and I think it's a fun novelty when we get it. I was in Deer Creek last year for Slow Maze. Very, very controversial.
Yes.
At the time. I like Slow Llama better than Slow Maze, but yeah, it's fun. Every time you get it, it's different enough that it's welcome.
And we're already at the end of the set with Rise Come Together. I'll say my piece.
I'm on the way to the bathroom.
Oh, you're right. Exactly. I want to say my piece. Then I want to hear from you guys. And I have a microphone, so I want to give myself a lot of credit here. I've come around on a lot of 3.0, what my friends over at the Stub Me Down podcast call Church of Trey songs, where everything is water, everything is sand, everything is overcoming obstacles, and don't give up on yourself. And that's a great message to have, whether it's Leaves or Life Beyond a Dream. More, I never needed you like this before, but I just can't get this one. I cannot get over it. Too cheesy for me.
Yeah, to keep it in the Church of Trey, preach, brother. I gotta say, this is my least favorite Phish song. I actively dislike it. I heard the first note and I said that was a beautiful first set, and I will be going to beat the crowd to the restroom. I like this song is grating. It is aggravating. I dislike it completely. I can't say anything nice about it.
In a pretty high profile spot too.
Yeah. I never want to hear it again. I really dislike it. And I want to be clear. I'm with you on most of the 3.0 songs. There's a lot of jaded vets that like to complain about this stuff. I will welcome most of that stuff. I like a lot of it, and I could go through the list. I like most of them. I don't like Life Beyond a Dream, but I really dislike Rise Come Together. It sounds like it should be played in a mega church in Orange County to me, not a Phish show.
Dave, what were your thoughts at set break?
Yeah, just kind of going through. So, we talked about Bye Bye Foot, and then I'm going to quote from my notes, which I sent to Andy. This is what I wrote when Tube started. Bye Bye Foot, I'm like, wow, this is good. I'm into this. I like this. Then they go into Tube. Again, I'm not familiar with these songs, right? My notes say, my God, he is rapping. Somebody call a cop. So that was not for me. The Tube was fine. It took, I really had to take a step back once he started the rap. It was rap adjacent, style.
Even that's singing. Very generous, by the way.
Yeah. Again, that I think probably, that I should be canceled just for saying that. But, the kind of bluesy feel with what I recognized to be the NICU kind of signature, I thought was kind of corny. Slave to the Traffic Light, again. I thought there was some nice bass. Mike, sounded good. Come Together, however, I actually like the melody.
Wow.
So like it. Wow. I was like, this is a pretty good, like most of the time I think Trey's melodies are not my speed. I guess that if I'm understanding, this other gentleman writes the lyrics and then Trey writes the melodies typically for the songs. Is that right?
Sometimes.
By and large.
Throughout most of their career, a man named Tom Marshall has been their primary lyricist. But it should be noted that since they came back in 2009, there have been a bunch of collaborations just like that. But more recently, like 2016, 2015 onward, Trey has kind of taken on all the responsibilities of being a songwriter music and lyricist.
Right. Okay.
And they're very identifiable when he's done both.
Yeah. Well, the lyrics I didn't think were great, but the melody did. I did kind of enjoy. So I don't know. Maybe we're coming at this from very different places, but
we are, which is good.
I'm trying to find things to like. You know. Anyway, all right. So that's where we are at set break. I think there was a song before Rise Come Together, between Slave and some. I don't know. Something kind of passed me by. So
there's one called Llama that was played.
Oh yeah, that one. I think I may have fallen asleep. I'm not sure. I'm sure it happened though. I'm sure I listened to it.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. Slow, fast, in between, whatever.
All right.
I don't know. Honestly, I guess I don't have any context for that.
So far, I can live with what we're getting from you, Dave. The NICUTs being cheesy that hurts me a little bit.
Corny.
Corny. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, they do this a lot where they come into and out of stuff. The night after this in LA, they played Tweezer and LA Woman, and they went in and out of both of them throughout the second set. I can see that gets a bit cheesy, a bit corny.
I mean, it sounds gimmick, like it sounded, regardless of the fact of what song they were teasing, it just sounded like a, generic white man blues. I mean, there's the two things that, or two of the things that are being brought to the table in a Phish show that are a challenge for me are the Clapton inspired white man blues. Like, imagine the blues, but only white people had ever been involved in this form of art, which is also their approach to rap, to be honest with you. And then honestly, the light funk. I would say light funk is not a genre that I'm fairly open-minded in terms of music. I like a lot of different types of music. I think it's fair to say. Light funk that goes down easy is not typically my favorite style. And they do indulge in a lot of that, And part of it is that, I think they're good musicians, and it's just kind of it always seems to me I don't know, as a listener, that it's just a groove that's easy for them to fall into. And especially with Fishman, it's like this, boom, this backbeat that he falls into. That's the first thing you learn when you're a rock drummer kind of thing. And it's it sort of is like I play guitar, and it's the guitars will play that pentatonic 5-note scale, and it's some people that's all they ever learn, and it just kind of a little bit too easy, it all just kind of sounds the same, and maybe it's also because there's a sort of element of that in the San Diego music scene. Andy will know what I'm talking about. The kind of a reggae inflected but very white kind of thing that's always been popular here, and I never went for that either. That's what I'm bringing to the table. And again, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying I bring my own trauma to this experience. So, and there you are.
Let me ask you something, David. I've never asked you this before, but you said to me once in passing in a conversation about something else. So listeners, David likes the Grateful Dead a lot. He knows their catalog backwards and forwards. He's a head. David also likes Goose, has attended Goose shows and likes them, is familiar with the catalog. Again, you said something in passing once that Goose and Phish jam the same way, and neither of them jam in the way that that the Grateful Dead does.
Mm-hmm.
What did you mean by that?
Part of it is that it's a little bit more of a major key kind of approach, whereas Jerry and everybody kind of following his lead kind of are often more in a minor Mixolydian type of mode, and it's just a sound that appeals more to me.
Mm-hmm.
With the Dead, it's never. Even at their slickest, it was never all that slick. You know what I mean? And I like the rough edges to it. With both Phish and Goose, there's more of a precise kind of sheen to it. With Goose, I think the songwriting is stronger. I think Rick's a really good singer. And there's just enough elements in there to keep me interested, although I don't like all their stuff. It's not there'll be songs that I like, probably half and half songs that I like and songs that I don't. But there's enough that, gets me into it. And there's the excitement of kind of Goose being the new thing. You know what I mean? Maybe if I was living in Vermont in 1987 or something, I would have been into Phish because it was kind of fun and cool. And it's you know what I mean? There's an energy to it. That's part of the package, and that's fine. You know what I mean? I can like whatever I like. I don't have to, you know what I mean? So that kind of draws a little bit of a distinction between the two bands, but I don't know if that kind of answers your question or not.
Yeah, I think so.
No, it does. It does. And I think there's a lot of legitimacy to it. I try real hard not to be the, well, actually guy, I will say though, just to because I know you are open-minded, a lot of what you're describing with like the Mixolydian phrases and the darkness where not everything is major key, Phish has done a lot of that, just not so much recently.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
should be noted
No,
that's
I
a
know.
part of what makes them up.
And sort of to clarify, like, Jerry came along before, to some extent. I mean, he came up before Eric Clapton kind of defined a certain blues rock sound. And, part of me just believes that like there was a fork in the road and, some people went in one direction, some people went in the other. Now, like, I like going to Dead & Co shows, and John Mayer is certainly like comes from that lineage as well. But, he like really, I think, has made an effort to subvert his own impulses and, be part of the Dead thing rather than make that a John Mayer thing. So that's a whole other kind of side comment. I think Trey can't kind of escape being a like 70s classic rock kid. And that's not always a bad thing, but there's elements that I hear in his tone and phrasing and things like that that just to me are like from the poisoned well of that. I don't know. That's all I got.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
Set 2.
Well, it doesn't end anytime soon because set 2 opens with No Men in No Man's Land, which is a very much learn one phrase and just vamp it for about 23 minutes. They do that though, but this song is kind of designed for that. I think it has really good lyrics, actually. I think that this is one that's a collaboration with Tom Marshall, while the rest of the band, probably led by Trey, writes the music. This song, though, provides a lot of space for band members other than Trey and Fishman to show off, and Paige McConnell, who hasn't really been mentioned yet, really takes over well at 11 minutes with this amazing wave of a synthesizer sound that grabbed my attention.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating sound. It's like this big rolling. It's like a rumble that comes through. Yeah, I love it. And I think this is in a lot of shows that you see Phish play these days. This would be the best jam you get for the night, and it would be an unremarkable show if that were the case. but you wouldn't be too upset. You would tell people, oh yeah, check out the No Man and No Man's Land. It was good. And here, like, this show is to me so good that it's like the 7th best jam of the night, But under normal circumstances, I think they really get into something fun and interesting, and they're very patient. I think they sit in it here in the back half of this song in a really cool pocket. And Paige is doing a lot with that big synth sound you're talking about.
Yeah, I loved it, and it kind of falls into Free. In a way, it's not an easy stop playing, start the next track. It just kind of rolls over into Free. And I thought it was a good call. Free is a good, just straight up rocker in the way that David was saying. It sounds kind of like it could have been a classic rock song, in my opinion. This is, even though it was written later, well, now it's not that much later, but later in Phish's career, it still sounds like it could have been inspired by, let's say, Genesis or something like that. Where it is part of that progressive, but also rock and roll backbone. To me, this jam sounds a lot like Tube, the same Tube jam, with the layering and a lot of different impulses from different band members. But then at the end, it gets very chill and calm, and it's unlike most versions of Free that I've heard. I liked it a lot.
I agree with all that. I think also the NICU teases here in Free are part of the similarity with the Tube jam. I think there's motifs carries through. I love this Free. We also start to get into a dark place here in this Free that really carries through the rest of the night. We start to get I'm certain that this was around the time that we started to lose the people who I came with who were not big Phish fans and were told that they were coming to a dance party, and suddenly they were getting some really dark shoegazy sounds, which was exactly commensurate with when I started realizing I was seeing one of my favorite shows I'd ever been in attendance for. Losing my mind.
In middle school science, that's what they call an inverse relationship.
Yes, exactly. I'm interested in what you thought of both of these, David. Do you agree with that take on Free?
Free, I mean, the intro riff, I would say rocks. But then, it did slip into quite a vast expanse of light funk, which I could have done without. Like, hold the light funk, please. Once it gets
so all of that NICU stuff you feel is like
I mean, I don't know if I'm making, I don't know, I'm not able to make the distinctions, between what I listened to this once. I'm not familiar enough with the motifs and so forth to be able to really recall exactly. But once I did get into the synth solo kind of stuff and that kind of spacey vibe, I thought it was kind of cool. I mean, I'm more there for that part of it.
Yeah.
Like exactly what you were saying. I remember you've been talking about that after the show, like telling me the next day or whatever. Like the people, our friends who you were with, like they kind of were, like about to call an Uber, and you were like, and some of the stuff was actually kind of cool. Like you might have liked it, and I know what you're talking about. Like I'm like, oh yeah, that's much more my thing than like a loose limbed boogie situation in this context.
I also, Brad, I don't know if anyone has ever put forward a theory of this. I think "Free" is the most attendance bias song in their catalog. By which I mean,
go ahead.
By which I mean, I don't think anybody like looks at a set list from a show the night before and goes, "Oh my God, they played Free." They're like, "Ooh, what an interesting Free placement." It's sort of, but when you're at a show, it's one of the first songs. Free was like the second Phish song I knew about, I think. And it was like in the Napster days, somebody who didn't like Phish at all would have Free and Bouncing Around the Room, and like that was probably it. But like when I'm at a show, I always have time for Free in a set list at any place. They fill the sound of every venue, gets filled every inch with that opening riff. As David says, it just rocks. It's just like simple arena rock sounds. Like even if they don't do something special and atypical like they did with this one, I always love a Free in a show.
I would agree with that. I think it's a perfect utility player.
Yeah.
It could go anywhere in the lineup.
Yeah.
It could expand, and there could be a type 2 jam at some point, although not often, but it could. It lends itself. There's a lot of open space for improvisation. Or it could be a 6-minute rock song.
Yeah.
It has a lot of space for bass fills, which I'm always a fan of. And when they're on a good night, their harmonies sound good. They don't always, but when they're, it's you love your own children, even when their faults, but their vocal harmonies, when they're hitting, everything about the song is perfect.
Yep.
But it's not a given. But you're right. It's always welcome. Plus, it's been around since 1995.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
so it's an easy favorite to have.
And I remember they opened with it. I was at the Fenway show, and I was just walking through the concourse of Fenway Park, staring at the Green Monster, and it's just Free belting out. I was like, this is incredible. What a rock band I'm listening to right now.
Yeah, and you could sense the crowd when you're there. Yeah. You could see the energy kind of undulating throughout the crowd if you're at a certain perspective when they open it.
Yep.
After this extensive jam of Free and several NICU teases, which I'm also always impressed from a musician standpoint, that no matter what key or tempo or style the band is playing, Trey can always find a way to play it and play it well. Yeah, I could see how it could be corny, but just the musicianship of being able to just take something from point A and stick it into point B, I think takes some talent, whether or not it's enjoyable to.
I'll also say, since we've got it on the table that this is maybe corny, I think the way they use the NICU in this show is very tasteful. Actually, that's what I have in my notes, is that it's like that they can sometimes, with these sorts of recurring teases and stuff, get on the verge of corny. I've seen them do that before, where I'm like, all right, guys, move on. But
especially with No Men in No Man's Land and Cross-Eyed and Painless, almost like every fourth song I see, they kind of go in and out of both of them.
Yeah. But this use of NICU, I think, is really tasteful and interesting, and with that song particularly, every time I hear NICU for the rest of my life, it'll be a different experience because of the show.
And that's what they do sometimes on the good nights. That's what they do. The next up, they cool things down with Joy, which does exactly what it's paid to do.
So it's a landing. It's a landing
spot. Yep. Yeah. Chills everybody out. And also in a weird spot, so does Sand, which you would think on a night like this where everything is prepped for big exploration, it's about a 7-minute version of Sand. It could be the studio version.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good, and it's played well. But it's sort of a warm up for what we're about to get next. Yeah,
next is Piper, which is a pretty smooth segue from Sand. It's something like your ripcord, almost as if the band could sense that Sand wasn't going anywhere, so why not begin a new song? That's me projecting probably, but that's how I heard it. And what I really liked about Piper, the Phish.net jam chart description calls it an ambience cloud. And I thought that was dead on, because like at 13 minutes, there's like psychedelic rock, but then it just turns into kind of cacophony, random weird sounds. This is for the people on the heavy drugs.
Yeah. During this Piper, a portal opened between Trey and I walked through it, and him and I had a relationship with each other. That
maybe you were the person on heavy drugs.
Yeah, maybe. But Trey, when I listen to this song now, I'm right back there. I'm right back there with Trey. Him and I have a mind meld. I have never felt closer to Trey than I did during this Piper. Every decision he was making connected with me and made perfect sense up until the very end, when he terrified me. And this song breaks down into shoegazy ambient dissonance, and it's scary. Like, I remember looking around, and there were people who were scared in the crowd. This is when
everything's peaking. End of the second. This is when it's peaking. This is the beam that you dropped at set break. This is when it's kicking in.
This was a heavy experience in the moment, and it was not sitting well with a lot of people. And not even people on drugs. People who were just like normies who were just like, "What? Who is this fun for? This is challenging." And I was like, "Yes, it is. That is exactly right." That I love it. This is the highlight of the night for me. If you're listening to this and you don't have time to listen to a whole show, dial up this Piper. This is what it's all about to me. I can't believe I can't believe the last 3 minutes of this song are 3 minutes. The last 3 minutes of this, the last 3 minutes of this song feel like 20 minutes to me of being physically tortured, and in a way that I enjoy, that I want to be part of. It's so dark. David, what do you think about this Piper?
I just want to cut in with since you guys are movie people, it's somewhere between my reference from Interstellar and Hellraiser now.
Okay, yeah.
The pain is so good. But Dave, I just had to get that in. Can't let up a Pinhead reference when I see it.
Yeah.
I mean, during Joy and Sand, I slipped into a coma and had to be revived. But once they brought me back around and I was Compos Mentis, the song part of Piper, I think, has a pretty nice kind of counterpoint going on. So there's some interesting composition stuff happening there. When they get into the jam, I like that the time signature kind of forced Fishman out of his pocket. And, he couldn't just rely on that like kind of same backbeat, like funk groove, that he had to kind of play different drum patterns. And it was kind of cool. In terms of the solo, I mean, it goes on a journey. I mean, it kind of gets into this like echoey thing, which is cool. I like that. And then he goes to the Wawa for a little while, and that sucked for me. And was back in the tasteless blues phenomenon. And then after a while, it goes kind of back into the echoey thing. Again, this is me projecting. Like maybe Trey woke up and was like, "Oh, actually, that's shitty." So I'm going to play something good. And then he goes into that shoegazy stuff at the end, kind of doubling down on the echo, and it sounds like he's kind of using an effect where he's playing a piece and then he's layering on top of it. That was cool. I mean, My Bloody Valentine, Ride Whoever, they'll do that the whole show. You know what I mean? They have the balls to just do that. And if you don't like it, you can peace out. I get that Phish is only going to use that once in a while as a little, cherry on top or something. If I had to choose, I would love to see 3 hours of that versus all the other stuff.
Hey,
you know what I mean? That's
good news, buddy. That last 3 minutes was 3 hours. All right.
Just told you exactly. Yes, exactly. Like the, whatever, the time crystal or something. Yeah. Most of the tourists checked out. Other than a few other things, I like Bye Bye Foot and stuff, but the part that I found most interesting and appealing to me is really whacking out with the effects and going crazy and getting dark with it. I wouldn't say that I was astral projected the same way Andy was, but I wasn't there. I'm listening while I'm, writing TPS reports or whatever. So, it's a different kind of set and setting. That's some cool, spacey, whacked out music. So there you go.
I also have good news for you, but it doesn't kind of involve time travel also. And so very quickly in the really short bullet point version is Phish was together for something like 20 years. Then things got a little wacky. They took a hiatus, as they called it. They came back for 18 months. Drugs and the internal scene kind of ate them up. So they took a break for 5 years and now here we are. All right. Since 2009, they are in the iteration of which we're discussing. So, Dave, in that 18-month period in the early 2000s, a lot of their jams ended like this. A lot of their jams ended like this, to the point where it became almost predictable. And if you are so interested, the music that was created at the time, I would have some recommendations if you want to dig a little further into stuff that does get out there. That's kind of like if planetariums existed in Hades, is kind of what I could best describe it as. So this is kind of almost a lighter version of what some of us got used to in 2003 and 2004.
Yeah, this is very February of 3.
Yeah. I mean, I probably would rather listen to My Bloody Valentine or Ride or Cocteau Twins, something like that. I don't know, if I'm being honest. But this texture or this, this flavor being brought into the mix here definitely got my attention. And,
and you loved
complimentary
it. You loved it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was better than other things. I liked it. It was good.
Right.
I did not like it.
Trey loves My Bloody Valentine. By the way,
don't make me take a stronger position. You know what I mean? Don't make me.
That's right.
Don't force me to take a position I'm gonna dig in.
That's right.
That could go the wrong way. I'm just saying. Let's leave it where it is.
Right. Yes. Right. I'm happy to hear what you're putting down. I'm picking up what you're saying. But we're not totally done with the show yet, or at least even the set. They close with Sense and Subtle Sounds. With the intro, we're back to 70s psychedelia for a while. Trey is having a great time with his delay pedal. You could hear it just looping and looping and looping, but it still somehow holds together. Then at 10 and a half minutes, we're back to the beginning. We've come full circle. NICU all over the place. So I'm loving this very much. And then Sense and Subtle Sounds, the song and the jam just kind of peters out into a mush of noise that ends the show proper before we get to the encore.
Yeah, I think that and I putting a little bow on the NICU thing here works really well. That section of the jam is the highlight for me. But I think this jam's all together. I mean, just as a piece of music, that from Piper and Sense and Subtle Sounds here, this last like 40 minutes of music is, like the fourth quarter, basically, as we say. I have a hard time thinking of something I'd rather end up seeing at a Phish show than these two.
Yeah. And they're of a piece for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
And
I don't think I clocked that these were different songs, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah.
No, which is not unusual, even if you're a huge Phish fan and you're there. That is They might just be different segments of a larger piece happen to be made up of two songs. That checks. So they go off, they come back on with Lonely Trip, which I really like. And my experience is that a lot of jaded vets who shit on Trey and his 3.0 songwriting, for some reason, this song gets a pass. A lot of people automatically like this song. Maybe it has like Bob Dylan vibes, or there's just a beautiful piano solo. It has kind of a structure.
Can I tell you?
Yeah.
Can I tell you what it is?
What is it?
It's essentially the same chords and melody as After the Gold Rush.
When doors are all closed tightly, with words the only keys, you may understand the reason while floating on the breeze. When I hear your voice responding, when no questions have begun, you may understand the reason why I'm flying to the sun. So why on this lonely trip, keep a watch for other ships, and if by chance our vessels pass, why on this...
Maybe that's it. Maybe instead of Bob
By
Dylan,
Neil
it's
Young.
Neil Young. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was like, okay, cool. Can I just listen to that?
Can I just listen to Neil Young?
Okay, all right, that was a cheap shot. But no, it's basically, it's two chords, back and forth, and the melody to the, not the look at Mother Nature on the run, but like in the dream I saw the nights, that's very, almost. It sounded, I didn't sit in ABM, but they sound almost like the same melody to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it has that classic rock nostalgic vibe, and even After the Gold Rush, like that song is like looking back and nostalgic. So it's like that on top of that. So I like that okay, but it was almost like a situation where like you see all these copyright lawsuits where people, Ed Sheeran or whatever is getting sued for. And I was like, I don't think Neil Young has listened to any new music in since 1972. But if he ever got around to like listening to this show and made it all the way to the encore, he might call his lawyer because it's very simple.
Yeah. No,
I won't tell him, but
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like the song. I think this does seem to get a bit of a pass from the jaded vets who don't like his new stuff. Context for David and anybody who's listening, this was one of the songs that was on Trey's Pandemic solo record that he wrote in his apartment in Manhattan during the height of the pandemic, the epicenter of the height of the pandemic, ambulances flying behind, on the street below him with dead bodies piling up in the morgue. That's the subject matter of this song. That's what Lonely Trip is about. I had a very emotional experience with this song when it was played. It was beginning to feel like the end of the pandemic, and he's singing about if our vessels pass, perhaps think of me at last. I think it was exactly the right song for this moment, and I think it's interesting to think of these sorts of songs that people mostly don't go see Phish to hear them play when they are put in the perfect moment, the perfect show, the perfect time of the tour based on what's going on in the world, that you can have as big of a experience with that as you would with a Yem or a Harry Hood or whatever. And as great as the Piper is, this Lonely Trip is it's a lonely trip that I think about, of a Phish show. And I think that's part of what I think about for why I have such attendance bias to it is I don't think any Phish fan could ever understand how I felt about hearing Lonely Trip as kicking off the encore. I was just, last week listening to the show, hearing that song, running through the same neighborhoods I run through now, and hearing the lyrics of the song. And I'm like, this is when I become a joke to the rest of Phish Twitter. But I cried thinking about this song and hearing it at the show and the pandemic and everything about it.
Well, dry those tears because the show's not over yet, and they close with their big stadium rock. Forget arena rock, like stadium rock. Probably, I say this every other episode. Have to check which is encored more, this or Tweezer Reprise, but can't go home unhappy with First Tube. You know, how many bands, arena filling bands that have the cachet that Phish does, can close the show, leaving everyone so pumped with an instrumental, no less.
Yeah.
And so I was thrilled. I always am, even though it's never going to go that different from what we already know. It's really a ribbon on top.
Yeah, I think completely everything I just said about Lonely Trip, to come out, play that song, this quiet, gentle little, basically, might as well be just Trey with an acoustic guitar.
Could be Neil Young with an acoustic guitar.
Or Neil Young with an acoustic guitar, minus the beautiful piano. So I would say just as perfect is to turn right around and say, all right, now let's rock these guys out and throw a first tube at them as they head out the door. Send everybody away smiling. First tube's a walk-off home run. Everybody gets to high five on the concourse on the way out with the first tube.
Last thoughts, Dave?
Is it between these two songs when he does the and I see you, and I see you, and I see you bit?
Yes.
That was some really rough comedy.
Dude, I'm ear to ear smiling with Trey. I'm just like, I hear that now and I'm like, I love this guy. I love him.
I think I was confused because it was called First Tube and there was Tube earlier.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's different. And I was just like, wait, this doesn't sound quite like the same. And anyway, I kind of I think I was a little confused. But okay, yeah, I was all right, let's wrap this up.
Do you like that rock riff at the minute? Dun 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 dun. No? Yeah,
it was okay. I think I was kind of checked out at this point, if I'm being honest.
I
think I was like, all right, I've done my duty. I've listened. I promised I would listen to this, and I have. There were things I liked. There was things that I didn't care for. We all learned the real whatever thing was the friends we made along the way. I don't know. Yeah. And here we are. Well, let's just bring it on home. I was walking to my car metaphorically walking to my car at this point in the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got to be traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Traffic to go listen to After Gold Rush.
Well, Dave and Andy from Rock Docs podcast, thank you so much for joining me. Andy, for you to tell us about what it was like to be at October 23rd, 2021 at Chula.
Yeah.
Did I get it right?
Uh-huh.
All right.
Nailed it.
And for Dave, for giving us your impressions of listening to it without any real personal connection. It was helpful. It was really good to hear that because, to be fair, that almost never happens on this podcast. So it's very valuable for us insane Phish fans to have an outside perspective just to keep us in check and realize not everything is always gold, even when we shit on it. Like sometimes we just need to know. We need to hear it from someone else. So thank you both for taking time out and being a part of it.
No, I just hope that Phish fans who are mostly, beautiful people who listen to this podcast don't walk away thinking this asshole, why do I have to listen to him or whatever? You know what I mean? I'm trying to be fair here. And
that's all we can ask of you.
I'm trying to call balls and strikes.
Listen, you loved Piper and you loved 5 by Foot. That's the takeaway here.
I love the rapping, the blues rock, the light funk, all of it. It's great. Yeah. My favorite. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Well, guys, just give me that Bye Bye Foot. You said it's only been played 6 times. Just give me that. Give me a mix of those 6 recordings, and I'll probably dig that a lot.
Fair enough. Well, as long as you came away with something. Some people come away with nothing.
Yeah.
You never know. But thank you. Again, the point is, I appreciate you guys taking the time to be here.
Thanks, man.
And that's it for today's discussion with Andy and Dave from Rock Docs. And today's episode, if you haven't noticed by now, is quite a bit longer than our usual shows. We had 3 voices instead of 2, plus we're all podcast hosts, so that makes sense. But that also makes for an extra long attendance bias fact check.
Attendance bias fact check.
The Mango song played at Andy's first show, September 17th, 2000, was clocked at 9 minutes and 42 seconds. The Phish.net Jam Charts describes it as, in from a great theme from the bottom into Doglog. Following an extended, straightforward outro, this improvisational version morphs into a rhythmic and pulsing groove that grows increasingly effects-laden and eerie before transitioning into free. So definitely a recommended version. Dave's first show, with help from Andy, was on December 4th, 1996 at the Sports Arena in San Diego. That was the only time to date that Phish has played that venue. The city as a whole hasn't been a popular destination for the band, as in their 40-year career, they've only played San Diego 5 times. Dave's other show, which he insists was at the Forum, was a bit more difficult to ascertain. He said that it was in 1999 or 2000, but Phish did not play that venue either of those years. I would guess that maybe it was the show from February 14th, 2003. Regarding Bye Bye Foot, according to Phish.net, the 6 times it has been played amounts to 0.31% of all Phish shows, or once per every 326 shows. So, on average, if Dave wants to catch it, he better start buying tickets now. The Fenway show that Andy brings up was the first show back on tour for Phish in 3.0, which was played on May 31st, 2009. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Andy and Dave from the Rock Docs podcast, you could find it anywhere, for joining me today, Phish.net for its help with the fact check, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show by visiting www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donating anything you can. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.